Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When your neighbor is the self-declared queen of the HOA, even a backyard barbecue can become an act of war. I just wanted peace, a pool, and good ribs. Instead, I ended up with flashing lights, false accusations, and a suburban scandal no one saw coming. There's a certain kind of peace you can only get when you step outside barefoot, coffee in hand, and feel the grass you mowed yourself just yesterday. The air is still cool, the birds haven't yet been scared off by the sound of leaf blowers, and your 6-year-old hasn't started asking why we can't have a pet alligator. That's my moment, my sacred, quiet morning ritual. I'm Owen Hale, 42, husband, father of 2, builder of decks, and destroyer of weeds. I live on the outer edge of town in a place I chose very deliberately, outside any HOA jurisdiction. That was non-negotiable when we bought the house. I didn't want a neighborhood where I'd have to submit a form to plant tulips or be fined for flying a flag with too much personality. Our home is tucked into a cul-de-sac that backs onto an old tree line. It's not fancy, but it's ours. I built a custom grill station out back, set up string lights along the fence, and even installed a pool with an actual deep end. None of that 3 feet of tepid regret stuff. On weekends, the backyard turns into a haven, burgers sizzling, kids laughing, music playing just loud enough to annoy a control freak, which, as fate would have it, I now have. Across the street, enter Karen Moore, mid-50s, perfectly ironed tennis skirts, walks like she's auditioning for a municipal code enforcement commercial. She moved into Pleasant Hills, the HOA-run community across the street, a few months ago and wasted no time ascending to president of the Homeowners Association, a title she wields like a scepter made of laminated rules. The first time we met, she introduced herself with that tone, the one where every sentence sounds like a warning. I'm Karen, newly elected president of the HOA. You know, we take neighborhood presentation very seriously around here. I smiled politely. That's nice. I don't live around there. That threw her. Well, still, she said, eyes scanning my property like she was prepping a violation list. Your home is visible from the main entrance to Pleasant Hills. Curb appeal matters to all of us. I almost offered her a complimentary set of blinders. Since then, it's been a steady stream of polite aggression. Letters in my mailbox about visual disharmony. Complaints about the color of my patio umbrella, and one truly poetic note suggesting that my wind chimes disturb the spiritual equilibrium of the street. I framed that one. But it wasn't just that she had rules. It was that she needed everyone to follow them, including people like me who lived outside her kingdom. She'd peer over my fence like she was inspecting a nuclear facility, wrinkle her nose at my grill smoke, and once had the audacity to shout, "Is that pool even registered?" I didn't even know pools could be unregistered. I mostly ignored her, shrugged her off, laughed about it with my wife. But in the back of my mind, I had a feeling, a tickle of foreboding. People like Karen don't let things go, and I had just become her unfinished project. Teenagers are strange little creatures. They somehow manage to be both fiercely independent and utterly clueless, all in the same breath. My daughter Sam, 15, going on 30, is no exception. She's sharp as a tack, loyal to the core, and has the sarcasm of a sitcom writer on speed dial. So when she cautiously approached me in the kitchen one day with that "don't freak out, Dad" face, I braced for something between a tattoo and expulsion. "Okay," she said, buttering a piece of toast like she was defusing a bomb. "This is going to sound crazy, but I'm friends with Katie." "Katie who?" I asked, still groggy and halfway through my first sip of coffee. "Katie Moore." I blinked. "Karen's daughter?" She nodded. "The HOA overlord's heir?" "She hates when I call her that," Sam smirked. "But yeah, we've been friends since last semester." I stared at her. "You're telling me the daughter of the woman who tried to report our hammock as a code violation has been coming over here?" "Not at first," she said quickly. "We met at school, sat next to each other in chemistry. We bonded over how neither of us understands mitochondria, and now we're like friends." She paused. "Best friends, actually." I leaned on the counter, processing. "And Karen doesn't know?" "God, no. If she finds out, she'll freak." Katie's not even allowed to talk to people outside the HOA unless they've had a background check, a wellness exam, and an HOA blessing. I almost choked on my coffee. "So, how have you two been hanging out?" "Mostly at school, sometimes at the library, but lately We've started seeing each other here when you're working or running errands. I rubbed my temples. You're smuggling in the enemy's child like you're running an underground railroad for friendship. Sam shrugged. Well, yeah, kind of. And here's the thing. I should have been upset. Furious even, but I wasn't. I actually felt a twinge of pride. These girls had done what we adults failed at. They saw past fences, bylaws, and Karen-shaped roadblocks. They found a connection in a war zone. I just nodded and told Sam to keep me in the loop. That Friday, it escalated. Sam burst into my office after school, backpack swinging, eyes wide. Katie wants to sleep over tonight. Okay, so? So she told her mom she's sleeping over at Ashley's house. Ashley? Yeah, totally made up. Lives in another neighborhood, has an innocent golden retriever, goes to church twice a week. Katie saved my number in her phone as Ashley M., just in case her mom checks. I blinked. You faked a person? She even sent Karen a fake address. My jaw dropped. Your friend has a full-on alias. Dad, this is Karen we're talking about. Katie basically staged a prison break. I rubbed my face. And I assume you're asking if she can stay here tonight? She's already on her way. Of course she was. When Katie showed up that evening, she looked like a fugitive disguised as a middle schooler. Hoodie up, backpack slung, wide-eyed. But the second she stepped into the house, she relaxed. Her laugh filled the kitchen, her socks slid across the wood floor, and the girls disappeared into Sam's room with popcorn and a plan to binge-watch half of Netflix. For a moment, I let myself believe this night would be normal. No HOA drama, no clipboard crusades, just two teenage girls and a dad who knew better than to get in the way of rebellion born out of injustice. But Karen, she had other plans. Plans that didn't involve popcorn. It was 1:36 a.m. when all hell broke loose. I was dozing on the couch halfway through an old Western rerun when a light buzz from my phone jolted me awake. I glanced at it, just some motion alerts from the backyard security cams. I ignored it. Probably raccoons again. Then, just as I was reaching to turn off the TV, I heard a car door slam. Hard. I stood up bleary-eyed and peeked through the blinds. Red bathrobe, blonde bob, clip-clop HOA heels on concrete. Karen, marching toward my house like she was leading the Normandy invasion with a phone in one hand and the other gesturing like a conductor on espresso. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but she was talking fast and loud, pacing like a caged lion at the edge of my property. I opened the door just as blue and red lights exploded across my front lawn. Two patrol cars came flying up the street, tires screeching, headlights washing over my hydrangeas like an interrogation spotlight. In a flash, 4 officers jumped out, hands on holsters, radios crackling, eyes scanning. I stood there in plaid pajama pants and a Led Zeppelin t-shirt, trying to figure out if I was dreaming, being pranked, or both. Sir, one officer shouted. We received a 911 call reporting a possible hostage situation. I'm sorry, what? I blinked. Here? This house? Yes, sir. Caller stated you were unlawfully detaining a minor female and making threats against her life. Excuse me. Behind me, the hallway lit up. Sam came sprinting barefoot to the front door, eyes wide, Katie close behind her, clutching a bowl of half-eaten popcorn. They looked like they'd just walked out of a slumber party, because they had. Sam yelled, we were watching Heartstopper and eating Doritos. What the hell is happening? Then I heard it, heels on gravel. Karen stormed into view, pointing dramatically toward us like she was in some neighborhood-themed soap opera. Ah, there she is. That's my daughter. He has her. He took her. The officers turned toward Katie, who stared back at them like a deer caught mid-TikTok. Mom, she groaned. I walked here. I told you I was staying at Ashley's. This is so embarrassing. But Karen wasn't listening. Her eyes were wild, mascara smeared from either tears or fury. You don't understand, she told the cops. He's not part of the HOA. He's a dangerous man with an unregulated fire pit. He's got that weird grill thing with wheels. And, a smoker. The officer closest to me glanced at my shirt. Do you own any weapons, sir? Only a Nerf crossbow and a steak knife, I muttered. Another officer looked toward the girls. You're not being held against your will, Katie practically snorted. No, but I might die of secondhand humiliation. And just like that, the chaos cracked. One officer stepped aside, muttering into his radio. Another let out a low whistle and shook his head. Karen was still yelling something about bylaws and neighborhood standards, but no one was listening anymore. Everything Karen had spun into hysteria was falling apart faster than her credibility. And me? I was standing there, half asleep, in pajama pants with flying pigs on them, thinking, this is going to make one hell of a story at the next block party. If there was ever a moment I felt like I'd slipped into an episode of some low-budget suburban crime show, this was it. Picture the scene. My front yard lit up like a football stadium, cops with flashlights canvassing the perimeter, and me, a middle-aged man in novelty pajama pants, trying to convince law enforcement that I had not, in fact, taken anyone hostage. Over a bowl of popcorn and a poorly timed rerun of Walker, Texas Ranger. My wife appeared beside me, bleary-eyed, cradling our son who'd woken up crying from all the flashing lights and shouting. She looked at me, then at the cops, and then at Karen like she'd just wandered into a live-action simulation of how not to parent. The police were doing their job, I'll give them that. One officer asked to see ID. Another requested access to security footage, which I gladly provided. A third tried to get a coherent statement from Katie, who was now wrapped in a blanket, still holding the same bowl of popcorn as if it were a sacred relic from a forgotten civilization. Let me get this straight, one of the officers said, flipping through his notebook. You told your mother you were staying at a girl named Ashley's, but that was a cover for staying here? Katie nodded. Ashley isn't real. We made her up because we knew Mom would freak out. From the yard, Karen erupted. That's because he's unstable. He has a fire pit with no HOA inspection. His lawn chairs don't match. His trash bins were out on a Thursday. There was a pause. Even the officers looked like they weren't sure whether to laugh or call for backup from mental health services. I tried to keep a straight face, but one of the cops broke first. He snorted, audibly. Another officer approached me. Sir, do you have security footage that covers your front entrance and living area? Yup, I said. And the patio, backyard, and barbecue zone. HOA paranoia pays off sometimes. Minutes later, we were gathered around my living room TV, watching black and white footage of Katie casually walking up our driveway 6 hours earlier, waving at my dog, and disappearing inside. No sign of struggle. No dramatic chase scene. Just a girl with a backpack and excellent posture. She rang the doorbell, I pointed out. We didn't even know she was undercover until 10 minutes ago. Officer Nurse 2 sighed and clicked off the video. Well, that clears that up. Karen, realizing the narrative was crumbling faster than her Botox-stiff composure, stormed up the porch, still in her pink fluffy slippers. She's lying to cover for him, she barked. You don't understand. He's a menace. He refuses to acknowledge community bylaws. Ma'am, the lead officer said firmly, this is not a jurisdictional matter. This is a false report. And depending on how the DA sees it, that can carry jail time. Karen blinked, suddenly realizing the headlights she'd called weren't just illuminating my lawn. They were exposing her. She stepped back, stumbled slightly on her slipper, and muttered something about needing a glass of water. One of the officers gently asked her to wait by her car. She didn't argue. Inside, Katie sighed like she'd just finished a 10-hour customer service shift. This is why I didn't tell her, she said. This exact reason. Sam gave her a fist bump. Still worth it. I sank into the couch. Somewhere in the background, the popcorn machine let out a final pop. And just like that, the noise faded. Except for the neighbor across the street, who leaned out her window and shouted, "This better be on next door by morning." The next morning felt like a hangover, not from booze, but from sheer absurdity. The front lawn was still marked up from tire tracks. Our dog wouldn't stop barking at the shadows left by last night's cruiser lights, and the smell of burnt popcorn lingered in the air like the ghost of poor decisions. I stood on the porch with my coffee watching the HOA Facebook moms begin their morning power walk gauntlet. Each one slowed down slightly as they passed my house. Some threw me a tight-lipped smile. Others just stared like I was a warlock who'd conjured sirens and lawsuits out of thin air. The best part? I had everything on camera. See, when Karen started pestering me months ago about my non-compliant backyard, I'd installed a full suite of security cameras. Not because I was paranoid, okay, a little, but mostly because I knew one day the HOA would try something more than just letters and glares. Last night had vindicated every penny spent on motion sensors and cloud storage. I spent the next 2 hours downloading footage. Katie arriving peacefully, Karen pacing and shouting on her phone. police arriving and questioning us calmly, and most importantly, no sign of any threat, weapon, or suspicious behavior beyond Sam's. Taste in horror movies. By noon, I was at the office of Kendra Hoffman, a no-nonsense attorney who specialized in property law and civil harassment cases. She reviewed the footage silently, her face unreadable, until Karen's shouting about fire pits started. Kendra chuckled once and said, "Well, someone just handed us a case on a silver HOA monogrammed platter." She explained that Karen's 911 call wasn't just reckless, it was criminal. False reporting to emergency services, trespassing, slander, and with the video evidence and police reports, we had grounds to pursue both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit. Karen had, in legal terms, stepped in it deep. By evening, I'd already been contacted by a local reporter. Apparently, the police scanner chatter from last night had lit up a few neighborhood drama threads. The headline on the local blog the next morning: HOA president mistakes sleepover for hostage crisis. Police, popcorn, and pajamas involved. Katie, bless her teenage bravery, called her aunt that night and asked to move in. Karen, according to whispered neighbor intel, had been advised by her own HOA board to take a leave of absence while the matter was under review. Funny, isn't it? Karen spent months telling everyone I was the threat to community order. Turns out, the only thing I'd ever endangered was her illusion of control. And now, the boulder she'd pushed off the hill was rolling right back toward her, picking up speed, powered by the one thing she never counted on: receipts. They say the courtroom is the great equalizer, where truth cuts through reputation, where facts drown noise. I used to think that was poetic nonsense, something lawyers tell themselves to sleep at night. But on the day Karen Moore faced real accountability, I became a believer. The courtroom was packed. Local press, curious neighbors, HOA board members suddenly dressed like neutral Switzerland. Karen walked in like she owned the place, dressed in power beige with a binder clutched to her chest like it might save her from drowning. Her eyes scanned the room, briefly locking with mine, and I swear, just for a flicker, I saw something behind the smug exterior. Maybe panic, maybe just sweat. Kendra, my attorney, was calm, composed, and surgical. She presented everything in a clear, damning rhythm. The security footage, the 911 call logs, the body cam footage from the responding officers. And when they played the part where Karen screamed, "He has my daughter and he's dangerous. He's got a smoker," the room actually chuckled. Except Katie. She was seated beside me, arms crossed, face unreadable. Her expression didn't shift when Karen avoided looking in her direction. It didn't shift when Karen's attorney claimed she was driven by maternal instinct in the face of real concern. But when her mom, voice trembling under oath, said, "I only did what any mother would do if they thought their child was in danger," I saw Katie's jaw tighten. Because Katie knew the truth. We all did. She hadn't been in danger. She had been running from it. From a house where love came with conditions, surveillance, and judgment. Karen hadn't protected her daughter that night. She'd used her as a weapon. When it was Katie's turn to speak, the room went silent. She stood tall, looked straight at the jury, and said, "I went to Sam's house because it was the one place I could breathe. My mom never asked me what I needed. She just assumed she always knew best, but she didn't. She never does. That night, she didn't save me. She humiliated me." Karen visibly flinched, and for once she didn't interrupt. When it came time for the verdict, the jury took less than 2 hours. Karen was found guilty of filing a false emergency report, and the judge didn't hold back in her statement. This court does not look kindly upon those who abuse emergency services for personal vendettas, nor does it excuse attempts to weaponize authority, be it parental or organizational, against those who are simply trying to live in peace. Then came the civil ruling. $75,000 in damages awarded to me and my family, plus legal costs. I felt Kendra squeeze my shoulder. Across the room, Karen sat frozen. No clipboard, no binder, no army of bylaws. Just a woman stripped bare in front of a daughter who no longer looked at her with anything resembling trust. As court adjourned, Karen made one final attempt. As Katie walked past her, she reached out, whispering, "Please, let's talk." Katie didn't even slow down. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. Reporters called out questions, but I didn't speak. I had nothing more to prove. Back home, the neighborhood buzzed for days. HOA board members held emergency meetings, scrambling to repair the association's image. Within a week, Karen was removed from her position. The vice president resigned quietly 2 days later. An audit was launched into internal abuse of power, and suddenly, Pleasant Hills had discovered humility. Me? I reclaimed my Saturdays. I grilled steak in peace, sipped bourbon by the fire pit, and watched my daughter and Katie laugh again like none of it ever touched them. But I knew it had. And so did Karen. She disappeared from public view not long after. Rumor had it she moved to another HOA 2 towns over. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Life returned to normal slowly, like a power outage easing back to light. No sirens, no porch interrogations, no wild-eyed HOA presidents screeching about unsanctioned pool furniture. Just me, my family, and the kind of peace you appreciate a lot more once you've seen what it looks like with flashing blue lights reflecting off your mailbox. The day after the verdict, I did what any suburban dad with a petty streak and a label maker would do. I upgraded the fence. 6 feet of cedar perfection, reinforced posts, solar lights, motion sensor cameras on every angle, and right in the center, a new sign handcrafted and carved in bold letters. We are family, you are surveillance. 911 is not a customer service hotline. Below it, I mounted a color printout from my security footage. Karen, mid-yell, in her slippers, with a face contorted into HOA-induced panic. A speech bubble drawn in marker over her head read, "She's watching Stranger Things. I just know it." It became a bit of a local legend. People started using it as a landmark. Turn right at the meme fence. A high schooler even dressed as Karen for Halloween, complete with clipboard and plastic badge that read, "Neighborhood Morality Enforcer." But there was one part of the night I never got closure on. Who tipped Karen off? Turns out I didn't have to wonder for long. A week later, as I was trimming the hedge near the mailbox, a quiet voice behind me said, "Owen, can I speak with you a moment?" I turned. Mrs. Hudson, 62, birdwatcher, professional curtain peeker, and longtime resident of Pleasant Hills. She looked sheepish, holding a Tupperware container like it might grant her diplomatic immunity. "I think I owe you, and your family, an apology." I blinked. "You?" She nodded, wringing her hands. "That night, I saw Katie head into your house. I didn't know the full story. I panicked. Karen's always made it sound like you were some, I don't know, compound-running anarchist. I thought I was doing the right thing." I raised an eyebrow. "And calling in the Kraken was step 1? She winced. "I just told Karen, not the police. I didn't know she'd escalate." She handed me the Tupperware. Peach cobbler, family recipe. Still warm. I took it mostly because it smelled like forgiveness. "You know," I said, "you could have just asked, instead of, launching a suburban missile strike." She smiled sheepishly. "Yeah, lesson learned." And I believed her. People make bad calls when they're wrapped up in neighborhood drama and fear-mongering newsletters. At least she had the guts to face it. I invited her in. Sam rolled her eyes dramatically when I told her who was at the door, but she forgave faster than I expected. Even Katie, hearing the story, just laughed. "Well," she said, "at least we made history." And we had. After the trial, Katie moved in with her aunt, Karen's younger sister, across town. She didn't speak to her mother for weeks. Not out of spite, but because, in her words, "I need space from someone who thinks control equals love." Karen tried to reach out eventually. First with long texts, then voicemail sob stories, then a bouquet left awkwardly at the aunt's doorstep, with a card that read, "Let's fix this." Katie didn't throw the flowers away, but she didn't call her back either. Not yet. "I'll talk to her someday," she told me, "but I need her to understand she can't just scare people into being close." Smart kid. I now host an annual block party in my backyard, HOA members and non-members alike. Karen, I heard, moved 2 towns over. Rumor is she joined another HOA and tried to ban bird feeders. Classic. But here, in our little corner of post-Karen suburbia, things changed. Less paranoia, more real connection, fewer binoculars, more barbecue. And at the entrance to my yard, next to the gate, I added one last sign. Before you dial 911, maybe knock.